Hey everyone, Mr. Sujano here. In this video, we're taking a look at the MPress Nano all-button controller. Let's get started. Alright, to kick things off, Paradise Arcade sent me this MPress Nano for a fair and honest review, and that's exactly what we're going to do here. Taking a look at the box, it's fairly minimalistic, but there are a couple of important things to note. One is this Freak Mod sticker. The second thing here, Cherry MX switches. And the third thing, it's officially licensed by Hitbox. Now taking a look inside the box, and the very first thing I see here is a nicely braided USB-C cable. The cable itself is fairly long, and the connector here is at a 90-degree angle, which I think is a nice touch. It'll help keep things nice and tight to the MPress Nano and less risk of damage. And on a quick side note here, if you wanted to purchase one of these cables on your own, you absolutely can. They're available on Amazon. They've got a 4.4 star rating with over 1,600 reviews. The next item in the box is the MPress Nano, and we'll get to that in just a second. Underneath the MPress Nano, we have some foam pads. These are optional, but I'd argue highly recommended. And last but most definitely not least, here is the MPress Nano. I've got the Evo edition. You can see the Evo logo etched in the bottom left-hand corner. This thing is surprisingly heavier than I thought, and it's also extremely thin. Here's a quick peek at the bottom of this thing. You can see there's 10 screws here holding all of this together. All of the edges around the top are slightly beveled, and it's powered by the USB-C port. And speaking about USB, here's an idea of how thin this MPress Nano is. It's almost as thin as the USB here. It's less than 1/4 of an inch thick. And surprisingly, it's thinner than the top of the housing for the USB-C cable. The entire body of the MPress Nano is made out of metal, specifically aluminum, and given the fact that it's so thin, I thought it was going to be flimsy, and surprisingly it's not. There's quite a bit of heft to it, there's quite a bit of rigidity to it. And for those who may be curious, because I'm going to get asked this one in the comments, here is my Snackbox Micro beside the MPress Nano. You can see the MPress Nano is a little bit wider. However, the real difference here is in terms of how thick both of these are. The MPress Nano is a fraction of the size of the Snackbox Micro, which is already small on its own. And it's also worth pointing out that the buttons on the MPress Nano have a significantly smaller profile. And here's the MPress Nano beside a couple of even smaller Fightsticks I have, including the very popular Versus Fighter. And when comparing this against the Versus Fighter, it's the exact same story here. The profile on the MPress Nano is significantly smaller. And here's the MPress Nano beside the MPress, a fraction of the size, and the button layout is also a little bit different. And this probably doesn't surprise you either, but the profile for the MPress Nano is also a fraction of the size of the MPress. And just for fun, here's the MPress Nano beside my other Evo-themed fight stick. This is the Quamba Drone. And interestingly enough, it's considered small by Fightstick standards. And I don't really need to do a side-by-side here, but again, here's the side-by-side between a regular Fightstick and this MPress Nano. Surprisingly here, the MPress Nano is about as thick as a fully mounted Sanwa button. Go figure. Here's a closer look at that top panel. The top panel has a couple of different functions. It houses buttons like your L3, R3 start and select. And it's also replaceable. It houses your PCB. Here's a closer look at that Evo logo. I'm a big fan of the Evo logo, and I think it fits nicely on this stick. And here's a closer look at the buttons. Interestingly enough, the caps on these are flat. While inspecting the outside of this MPress Nano, I noticed that where the base meets the top surrounding the USB-C port, there's a bit of a gap. It's not necessarily perfectly flush. Now this might not be a bad thing. It might hold that USB-C connector in there extremely firm. I mean, there are a couple of screws surrounding it. The screws stick out from the case ever so slightly, and fortunately they're not sharp or anything. Here's the MPress Nano sitting on my lap, and here's some button ASMR for you. Here is the optional but highly recommended foam attached to the MPress Nano. The foam is fairly low profile, it's soft and very grippy. Now it does cover the entire back, including the screw holes, which may pose a problem if you like to open this thing up quite a bit. However, and this is a big one, the back of the MPress Nano is metal and it might scratch surfaces you put it on, so the foam helps protect things. I've had the ability to test out this Nano for a few weeks now, and I'm in absolute love with these buttons. These are some of the most confident buttons that I have ever used. I'm never guessing as to whether or not I hit a button during a match. You know when you hit one of these things. There's not a lot of dead zone on these buttons, and they are very loud. To be honest with you, I had a difficult time finding the dead zone on these buttons. I had to press them ever so lightly, but with enough force just to push them down a little bit. If you push them down too hard, you're not going to find those dead zones. If you push them down too light, the button's not going to move. As for actual gameplay, I had no issues whatsoever executing anything on the MPress Nano. If you've used a hitbox before, you'll be right at home here. If you've used a keyboard with mechanical switches before, you'll be right at home here. Here's the technical detail for these switches. They're called Cherry MX Ultra Low Profiles. They're kind of similar to MX Blues here. They have a 0.8mm pre-travel, a 1.8mm total travel. They do have an audible click as they are tactile. And they have a 65 CN operating force. Prior to being available on the Nano, the MPress Ultra Low Profiles I think were exclusive to Dell and Alienware. So let's get into what I like, what I don't like, and whether or not I'd recommend the Paradise Arcade MPress Nano. And we'll start out here with what I like. First and foremost, I love the fact that this case is made out of aluminum and is very sturdy and has a decent heft to it. It's not flimsy at all, and it'll hold up pretty well if you try to bend it on your own. On top of that, I like there's a bunch of colors to choose from. They are all metallic colors, and you can even choose the color of the control panel. The one included on mine is white. You can even choose the color of each individual button. I like that the control overlay is easily replaced and also reasonably priced. In fact, if you get tired of the color of the MPress Nano, you can replace the entire shell for, I'd argue, a reasonable price. And speaking about switching, I love the fact that you can actually switch the PCB in this, and very easily at that. The base model is compatible with PS3 and PC, but there are two other options available, including the MPress Nano Brook PS5 upgrade. If you wanted to make this thing compatible with a Nintendo Switch, PS3, PS4, Xbox One, Xbox 360, PS5, Neo Geo Mini, and a whole bunch of other systems, you absolutely can, but it will set you back $110. And speaking about PCB, the base PCB in this features Cerberus branch code, and that's thanks to FreakMods. Remember that sticker on the box. If you take a look at the chart, FreakMods Cerberus code has extremely low latency. So pair that with the Cherry MX Ultra Low Profile switches, and you've arguably got a very quick stick. Now let's go over what I don't like about the MPress Nano, and there are a couple of things here. The first one, I already pointed it out. I'm not a big fan of how the metal goes around the USB-C port. I don't like that the screws stick out ever so slightly, and I do wish that it was nice and flush there, but that's not a big deal. The second thing here, and this is going to be a matter of personal preference, these buttons are not hot swappable. And I think that might be because of the switches being used, the Cherry MX Ultra Low Profile switches. And if that's a sacrifice I have to make to get these switches, I'm actually okay with that. The next thing here is also a minor gripe, but the foam padding on the back covers the entire stick. There are no cutouts for the screws. So if you have to get at the screws, you've got to peel this foam padding away, and it is stuck to the entire back. So good luck getting it back on. The second last thing I'm pointing out here really isn't a big deal for me, but if you like to customize your sticks and put your own artwork on it, it's going to be a little bit difficult with this case. You're going to have to get a sticker or a decal and stick it on. And the last thing here worth pointing out, and again is not a big deal for me, but might be a big deal for some people, the MPress Nano is loud. Here's the MPress Nano compared against the MPress. So here are the buttons on the MPress. And here is the MPress Nano. Now, after going over my likes and dislikes, let's take a look at the base price for this MPress Nano. And the base price is $170. As tested is $190 because I got the $20 Evo Edge. In comparison, let's say the Razer Kitsune here, Kitsune, I think that's how you say it, is $300 US, almost double the price. And the Snackbox Micro Lite is $165, which is compatible with the PC and Switch. And for reference here, the base MPress Nano is compatible with PS3, Xbox, Nintendo Switch, and PC. So for $170, the big question here, do I recommend the MPress Nano, yes or no? And the answer is absolutely yes. I think Paradise Arcade did a fantastic job with the MPress Nano. It's one of my favorite fight sticks to date, and I'm not joking with you on that one. Anyways, that is all I've got for you in this one. Straight to the point, all stuff and no fluff. Huge shoutouts to Paradise Arcade for providing this MPress Nano for a fair and honest review. And I stress, fair and honest. Let me know your thoughts about the MPress Nano in the comments below. If you like this video, leave a like. If you didn't like this video, leave a like. Hit that subscribe button, check out my other videos. Don't tempt fate, save your state.